Dennis Rader unalived 10 people between 1974 and 1991. Your Discovery show, he may have influenced Brian Kohberger. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Dr. Detective series. I'm your host, Troy Looney. We're going to talk about Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer. So in Kansas, roughly 1974 to 91, Mr. Rader unalived 10 individuals. And unfortunately, we have new evidence that was developed. Case ongoing, FBI task force, many individuals, daughter included. We're going to talk about his daughter. We'll see a short video with her engagement, some things she encountered, some evidence in her perception of how her father may have influenced Brian Kohberger. In Kansas, Mr. Rader avoided capture for 30 years until a news report was aired and questioned what happened to the BTK Killer. Because as they say, serial killers just don't disappear. All right, let's take a look at a short video and we'll talk about how he was captured by the FBI.
What could be an intriguing connection here. We're learning more about criminology student Kohberger, including the fact that he studied under famed criminologist Dr. Catherine Ramsland. Ramsland has studied notorious serial killer Dennis Rader, also known as BTK, which stands for bind, torture, and kill. He has been convicted of killing several people between the years of 1974 and 1991. He was arrested more than 15 years ago. He's behind bars. Rader's daughter is Carrie Ralston. She says she's concerned her father may have been in contact with Kohberger. Carrie Ralston is my guest now, and good morning to you. A lot of confusion connections here. Just want to try and take it slow here, Carrie, okay? This teacher had a contact with your father as she was teaching in Lehigh, Pennsylvania, DeSales University. Now, Kohberger was studying for his PhD in the state of Washington. Why do you believe he had a connection to your infamous father, now in jail?
It's really common in general for people in the public or criminology students especially to correspond with my father via letters and sometimes talk to him on the phone. And since Dr. Ramsland had a long-term, several years, academic, intimate relationship with my father and a personal friendship, I wouldn't be surprised if Kohberger at least tried to contact my father or had contact. At this point, we don't have proof of it. We would need to see letters either at Kohberger's home or in my father's jail cell.
Wow, so that physical evidence may be out there. It has not been confirmed, but maybe it's a possibility as you express here. Your father studied criminal justice at Wichita State. And then you say he went on to continue studying about his own crimes. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so my father's first murders were the 4 members of the Otero family in January of '74. Then he quickly entered into the criminal justice undergrad program at Wichita State University in Wichita, Kansas. So he was a student mainly taking night classes at Wichita State for several years while continually committing BTK murders, committing a total of 7 in the 1970s before I was born. And then he was sort of a prolific student of his own after he graduated. As I was growing up, he always had like true crime books in his house. And when I got older, I was at least able to share like fiction with him. Since he's been in prison, he said he's been trying to understand what's wrong with him, and he's been a prolific studier of himself and other serial killers.
Carrie,
and then he went on.
Yeah, can I ask you this then? Why is it that students would reach out to your father? Why would professors reach out to the father, your father in this case?
Well, professors try to reach out to my father from an academic standpoint because it's rare to be able to pick the brain of a true psychopath. And have them at least be willing to talk to you. Ramsland had developed a friendship with my father and then ended up publishing a book in 2016, a biography on my father that my father interviewed with intensively and massively had input into. It's basically a first-person account of his crimes. Students in general, sometimes they're even assigned to contact criminals as research projects. Or to develop their own research. I'm contacted pretty regularly by students asking me, can you get a hold of your father and have him return my letters?
Okay, but you don't have any proof that Kohberger reached out to your father. What you're trying to draw here is a connection through this professor. And has the professor said anything yet about this, Dr. Ramsland?
On Saturday, she made a public statement that she was not making public statements at this time, I believe due to her connection with DeSales University and her possible, legal connection here with Kohberger as being his professor in the master's program.
Is that the only, sorry, Carrie, is that the only connection that you're tying here? Or is there some measure of evidence that you have learned through the media over the past 7-8 weeks after these murders?
My first time I heard of any connection to Dr. Ramsland was after Kohberger's arrest. And then there's speculation about Kohberger's ties to my father, but we're going to have to wait, to see if anything comes out in trial or after the trial.
Okay, well, one question here. The Kohberger family, the father drove in mid-December all the way across the country from the state of Washington to Pennsylvania. Here's a family statement. We fully cooperated with law enforcement agencies in an attempt to seek the truth and promote his presumption of innocence rather than judge unknown facts and make erroneous assumptions. Can you reflect on what the family's going through after your own experience? And you lived this, and you have not had contact with your dad in about 1.5 years.
I mean, as far as we know, his family is innocent. And so from my perspective of what my own family went through, it's basically utter hell. It's shock. I mean, they had a no-knock warrant come into their house in the middle of the night. They're probably still in shock, confused, grieving. It was reported that the mother and sister were upset at the hearing yesterday. It's a lot to process. You're trying to figure out how to pay for legal defense. You can't afford it. You're trying to answer questions to the FBI. You're trying to manage media, and you're trying to ask yourself what went wrong or what did I miss? And as parents, you're dealing with a massive amount of guilt, probably. It's a lot, and it's going to be a long time for them to find recovery.
Carrie, thank you for sharing your story. Carrie Ralston, it's certainly...
So yes, the question is, was there influence by Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer? Of course, his moniker is Bind, Torture, Kill for BTK. Kohberger, different situation. At the time, we know he was pleading not guilty. We know that's now changed. He's since pled guilty, but he's not given a reason why. We'll talk about that coming up soon. So was there some kind of influence? BTK's daughter, Carrie, talks about it's normal for students or the public to reach out to talk with prisoners, to talk with these serial killers. Should that even be allowed? We do know Rader was actually caught by the FBI 30 years later as a result of his arrogance, as a result of him wanting some kind of infamy or notoriety for what he had done. He thought he was smarter and still thinks he's smarter than the FBI. I'll talk about shortly meeting Carrie Ralston briefly and attending CrimeCon 2023. But Dennis Rader was caught as a result of his arrogance. When the news published the article about what happened to the BTK Killer, right? He sent a letter in. Mr. Rader sent a letter in to the news, taunting the FBI and asking, could they retrieve information from a floppy disk? Of course, the FBI said, oh, no, we can't. And they did. They very well could. Law enforcement's allowed to lie to criminals. Again, does it work? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, fortunately, it did. So they were able to capture various components forensic elements such as metadata from the floppy disk, compared his DNA or did a DNA comparison between what was left on the disk and obtaining a search warrant for his daughter's medical records for a pap smear, right? And with the article, they baited him, they caught him, fortunately. Question is, what happened between that time? How many other people have been influenced by Dennis Rader? And is arrogance always a part of it? We talked about his daughter, Carrie Rawson. She said there's new evidence potentially that existed. This was 2023. As a result, Dennis Rader being arrogant, being still highly intelligent, we know he had obtained a bachelor's degree in criminology. So that's an interesting point because Rader studied, obtained his degrees in criminology as well as Kohberger. Of course, obtaining a master's and being a PhD student. So he went a little further in his education, or did he? Both serial killers, both identified as serial killers. What kind of influence, right? What kind of writings? We're going to talk about the professor that taught Brian Kohberger as well. Some of that new evidence that was discovered in 2023. Carrie Rawson joined a FBI task force and multiple other agencies combined. They actually went back and obtained a search warrant in 2023. Now let's put this in context and perspective. Dennis Rader was arrested in 2004, right? These crimes happened. The initial victims occurred between 1974 and 1991. He wasn't arrested until 2004, 2005, 30 years later, roughly. And as a result, 2004, 2005, still ongoing with the investigation. They were able to discover new evidence. So what did they do? They went to the home of Dennis Rader and decided to obtain search warrants. And based upon the case evidence investigation, they were able to dig up the shed at his home. Why this wasn't done initially, don't know. But the new evidence was able to discover new items, artifacts, something they would call trophies, identifiers from other victims, clothing, items kept as souvenirs. Terrible. The unfortunate thing is many of these items did not belong to the initial 10 victims. So what does that mean? There were potentially more victims. So he was arrested, has remained in custody in prison, received 10 life sentences. So he's not getting out. No options for appeal, no options for early release. I believe his date is like 2080 before he's even eligible, but that's not going to happen. So he was arrested, and there's considerations of the new evidence, these new artifacts that have been discovered, separate from the 10 initial victims. Again, prayers go out to these victims and their families, right? Terrible individual, just pure evil. As an individual, you can look at the eyes and you can kind of see there. Is there a comparison between him and Kohberger? I'm going to show you some images. These are drawings. Okay, so I'll preface that. If it's too graphic for anyone, again, we're just going to talk about some of these images and how they're relevant to the new evidence that has been discovered. So these are drawings. We don't know if these are actual victims, but police are now narrowing down some of the additional investigations, some of the additional missing parties or missing people to maybe have identified who these victims are. One victim in particular has been recently identified by the sheriffs in this particular county. This is a drawing, and now Rader had potentially hundreds of drawings like this. This was a missing person on the left here, and sheriffs believe they may have identified her based upon the drawing and the additional investigation and the new technology that exists and so forth. So comparing and contrasting with what they've been investigating for now 30, 40 years or 50 years, essentially, they're able to hopefully make the identification and notify family, but that's ongoing. So Rader is a subject of interest for these additional missing persons, some other drawings that have taken place. I'm only showing two here. As I mentioned, or 3. I apologize. Rader had an interest in barns and sheds, high interest in that. And as I mentioned, there were hundreds of drawings like this one, similar to this one, that he had. Some may have been part of his imagination. Some may be additional victims that they're now fearing or that they've been identifying. Some other drawings just may be speculation or his memory, but he does like to taunt and toy with the government. Again, we can't discount him being intelligent if he avoided capture for all this time and was able to carry out these heinous acts. But the question is, again, how could a person do this? He had a daughter. He was unaliving people before his daughter was born, as Carrie mentioned. At least 7 victims, 7 of those 10 that we're aware of, and then leading up to a continuation of additional victims. And as far as we know, even beyond that time of 74 to 91, up to his capture, what was he doing? What had he been taking part of? Who potentially could be an additional victim of the BTK killer? But he had a daughter, right? So he raised his daughter during that time. Could he have disappeared and just been taking care of family? The daughter mentioned she would come home, she would see different things, different activities inside, outside of the home, near the shed and so forth. Same shed they dug up, by the way. And she wasn't aware at the time. Of course, she's been totally traumatized since discovering who her father was. So now she's interviewed on a regular basis, appears on many shows and so forth. But this is his daughter now, Carrie Rawson. He was obviously there for her graduation, and I had the privilege to meet her at CrimeCon 2023. So we'll talk about that coming up. His daughter since written a book, A Serial Killer's Daughter, and published. And again, she's an avid speaker on a regular basis. Sometimes it's highly emotional, as you can just imagine the trauma and just imagine the embarrassment. Or, what does that feel like to have your father have been this notorious serial killer? So again, a lot to digest, a lot to consider. That has to be a post-traumatic stress disorder situation, right, with her. As I said, I attended CrimeCon 2023. I was fortunate to attend a podcast where Carrie spoke of her involvement now with the federal agencies, involvement with a task force, whereas she would assist them with various questions. Dennis Rader is very arrogant and very, still highly intelligent, but very arrogant, as to where he wouldn't talk to investigators, but he would talk to his daughter. So they would feed her questions to go in and talk with him about and things to ask him, right? So CrimeCon, if you're not familiar with, it is a highly popularized event in the true crime circuit, true crime nation. Has anyone attended CrimeCon? Was anyone there for 2023 CrimeCon? Again, I attended that in Orlando. Reason for that, I was nominated under a new category for America's Greatest Detective. I was a finalist of 3, which I'm very proud of, very humbled by. I didn't win. Cynthia Garza won that year, but it was still an amazing event to attend and be nominated out of all the detectives and all the casework throughout the country for the Clue Award. So being a finalist, very humbled. That being said, the reason for that was my casework with the serial killer, serial arsonist, Stanley Ford, here in Akron, Ohio. This case will be covered coming up. I'm going to dial in with my other investigators, partners, and so forth, see if we can get a team or get the team back together to talk about this case. But I was lead detective for this case, and there was quite a few people involved. But I was able to get him convicted along with the team. And Stanley Ford killed 9 people in this case, and the family pet. He received 9 life sentences plus 20 years. So we'll dial back to this. This is why I attended the Clue Awards and got to experience what the true crime world is all about, thus leading me here and them kind of creating me. So the Carrie Rawson seminar and podcast she talked about, she did mention the task force, which this was October 2023 for CrimeCon. She then quit the task force that November of 2023 for her own personal reasons. Maybe she was getting too close. I do know that She mentioned during her podcast and during her appearance, she would talk with her father and ask questions. And she said he's intelligent. He's even tried to reinvent himself. He does receive fan mail. He receives correspondence from people. How that's allowed, I guess, you have the right to receive letters and so forth. I guess they have to kind of vet everything. But can you imagine the amount of people that have contacted him? Question is, were one of those individuals Brian Kohberger? As I said, there's other potential victims that have been discovered. This is 2023. So now, Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, is a suspect, a person of interest in these other victims. Potentially, he may be charged with additional counts or crimes. We'll see what happens moving forward. But to make the comparison and connection, again, we're talking a 30 to 50 year span of time for case investigations and files and follow-up, and still trying to locate individuals and locate scenes. And with him not being cooperative, very difficult, can be very frustrating. But they did find new trophies when they dug up the shed at his home. He was named a prime suspect as a result, and now 2 unsolved cases in Oklahoma and Missouri. They found what's called trophies, or what law enforcement likes to call souvenirs. Unfortunately, the serial killers will keep items of clothing, IDs, license, necklace, jewelry, and so forth as souvenirs, in their words, or trophies or artifacts, something to remind them of their victims. Unfortunately, talk about pure evil. So again, he is now a person of interest in additional crimes. The other thing that is even more disturbing, when Carrie Rawson interviewed her father in 2023 in prison, she said, "Dad, how many victims were there?" Dennis Rader motioned like a 1 and maybe a couple zeros. What does that mean for the case? Obviously, we're highly intelligent. We all know. With you all as my crime scholars, as I've called you before, and I'm branding you, that looks like 100, or is it hundreds, or is it more than that? We're not quite sure. Evil, evil, evil individual. What does that do to his daughter? Maybe that's the reason why she stopped talking with him. Maybe that's why she cut communications, if she's in fact done that completely. Can you blame her in that context? What would that do to anybody who experienced that? Bad enough that you unalived, or her father unalived 10 people. Now there's potentially more victims, more souvenirs, more evidence, essentially. So again, we talked about inmates being able to receive and send mail. He has fans. His daughter, Carrie Rawson, she said her dad has fans, right? So the creepy thing for me, and the thing that's bothered me with my 32 years in law enforcement, is, yes, we catch people. We've done outstanding work. I'm very proud of it. But how many people have we not caught? How many serial killers and just killers are out there still? How many of these people are studying what's happened? You know, not everybody is playing for the positive team. They're not playing for the right side, or as I like to call, a Jedi versus a dark side, right? Light and dark, good and evil. So I say that to some of my students I teach in forensics and cybercrime. Some of you may be playing for the wrong team, but we'll see you soon, right? Know that we're watching, know that we're investigating, know that all data, trails, and evidence is now archived. So the gift and the curse of technology, things can be identified, things can be tracked, things can be discovered. But I say this to mention, these people are doing their homework. Rader did his homework. And as mentioned in the video by his daughter, he became his own case study after committing these heinous crimes. And he would send and even co-author books, such as a case with one Michigan man that bought a used copy of a book written by Dennis Rader, co-authored. And this customer said he found one of Rader's drawings tucked inside the book. Was that done intentionally? How was that missed by the guards when he sent this out? Maybe they looked at it, oh, it's just a book. Did they consider that? Of course, their mind's probably elsewhere. But this was on the drawings, it had features of what appeared to be bondage, racks and ropes and so forth. So again, just like any of us have, this man had the same question. Why was a serial killer known for binding and torturing people allowed to draw pictures and send this evidence out to the public? Question is, why would you be contacting or want to buy a book from him? I guess the interest is there, and the purposes of law enforcement and science and forensic science and psychology and everything. We all want to know the why. We'll talk about that coming up as well, because it's relevant to the Rader case and also to the Kohberger case. The why is crucial. Let's take a look at Dennis Rader, his transitions here, right? This is his high school picture, 1963, versus the recent picture, or moving up to more recent, but in 2004, the middle picture here where he's captured in court. And then the more recent picture, 2023. So he is aging. The daughter mentioned he was 5'11". He's now an old man. Of course, she's trying to minimize what he's done. It's still her father. No matter how evil he is, it's still her father. Does that justify it? No, not at all. He's going to remain there. But how are these people contacting him? My question I want you to consider is look at the eyes. Have the eyes changed? Does it appear that even as in high school, he had an ominous look? There was mention of him having different sexual fantasies and different views, narcissism, and so forth, where he would torture animals and various things. All the common practices and common behaviors of someone that exhibits that as a serial killer. And then how did that evolve? We saw what happened as a result going into his future after high school. But how does that influence? Could that influence other people, other individuals? Pretty frustrating stuff. As we talked about the influence with the Idaho killer, Kohberger, let's just think about it for a second. Both study criminology. Kohberger's professor, Dr. Catherine Ramsland, a psychologist known for her research on serial killers. She has an actual class about serial killers. And this is why she had her students reach out or would have them reach out to various inmates. She reached out herself. She's authored 73 books and thousands of articles. Again, she had correspondence with Rader. She co-authored and wrote a book, Confessions of a Serial Killer, where she got first-hand accounts from his word, from his direct knowledge and direct interview of what he did, how he did this. So essentially, she wrote his autobiography. Was this accessible to Kohberger? Of course it was. Just like any of the rest of us. Did he study this? There were some mentions he may have been studying Dennis Rader. Again, Dr. Ramsland made a statement after Kohberger pled guilty. One day after, Dr. Catherine Ramsland made the statement. I have to look at the framework of what I taught and wonder, did I inspire him in some way? So she wants to know, was she a direct influence on his actions or activities or his interests? She said he was a bright student. She taught Kohberger at Pennsylvania's DeSales University, where he then went on to pursue higher education with a master's and even becoming a PhD student. She said he's very intelligent. She made additional statements saying there really isn't anything that stood out to her. She added she didn't observe any red flags, typical amongst psychos she studied. Nice word, right? Including BTK serial killer Dennis Rader. Ramsland said Kohberger seemed to be eager in the classroom. He was polite, respectful, intense, and curious. And she really thought he was a promising student who could have really made a mark in this industry and with his career in a positive way. We do know that is not the case. He went the other direction. That doesn't diminish his intelligence. Rader, again, when we talk about the why, we want to know why someone did this. As a condition of Kohberger's plea deal, he did not want to disclose why he did what he did. Talk about an insult to the victims. Talk about an insult to the court system. Talk about an insult to the families. So we're talking about closure, and we talk about the why. This is what investigators, we hinge our investigation on the success of understanding and getting the confession to know that we have the right individual. We want to know, we want to prove, we still can prove that. But when they state, yes, I did this for this reason, that is the why. We know the who, what, where, sometimes the how and when, but the why factors in always. Always. Maybe this will be the case if it's stated during the sentencing. If he makes a statement, we'll see what happens. I imagine Kohberger's going to want to write his own book and publish. Kohberger's want to most likely be interviewed by Dr. Ramsland. Dr. Ramsland interviewed and wrote a book with Dennis Rader. Why wouldn't she write a book with Kohberger, right? But let's talk about the why. Dennis Rader said his why. His motivations were complex, involving a combination of sadistic pleasures, sexual fantasies, a need for dominance, and a narcissistic desire for attention, which he called Factor X. With Kohberger, the fact that he took a plea deal, we get no explanation as a part of that. He pled guilty to all 4 murders or unalivings. He pled guilty to that, and has not publicly explained his motive. Again, attorney-client privilege. Maybe he spoke to his defense counsel. Maybe that will be stated, or we'll get some kind of statement at the sentencing. We'll see what happens. But again, what a slap in the face. So I apologize for him, to the families, to the victims. We'll see what happens. Again, he did not provide a motive. And there's also a gag order in place that eliminates evidence from being shared as of right now. We'll see what happens if he does file for appeal or anything of that nature. But again, what kind of influence may have been considered, may have been studied, may have been researched? Dennis Rader said he has sympathy for the Idaho Killer. He has sympathy for Kohberger, not for the victims. Again, another slap in the face. So, whether he's trying to be relevant again, or I think he's always going to be relevant as far as his heinous crimes. But now, almost like to give a high five to this guy, right? To each other. I guess they're about the same lifestyle and the same heinous crimes that we now know of. But what kind of influence did that have, or could that have, or even on the next individuals? Rader sentencing, as I mentioned, Dennis Rader received 10 consecutive life sentences in Kansas. His earliest potential release date is February of 2180. He's going to serve a minimum of 175 years in prison without the possibility of parole. So he's there. So as far as influence, I ask you, was there any consideration? What do you think? Was there influence as far as the Kohberger case with Dennis Rader? There's been a lot of video, a lot of media coverage, and there will continue to be additional new evidence, I'm sure, that'll surface, new statements, new potential videos, social media postings as things progress. So we'll see if Kohberger makes a statement. But this has been the BTK Killer Influence with the Dr. Detective. I want to thank you for watching. A lot to consider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Brought to you in collaboration with the True Crime Talk channel with STS Nation. You can find the podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and several other platforms. Again, I want to thank you. As always, the Dr. Detective sends love, blessings, and let's continue to go. Let's continue to engage. Let's continue to watch. Thank you so much.